While the Caribbean today is an international hotspot for tourism, during the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, it was the center of the triangular trade in the piratical world. Slaves were brought in from Africa to labor on plantations. Raw goods from these plantations were then shipped to Europe to be refined into manufactured goods, which would then be traded for more slaves, continuing the constant cycle of commerce and greed. Naturally, many sailors turned pirate in an effort to get rich quick. Whether in service to a nation or on their own accord, thousands of men and hundreds of ships would patrol the waters from Mexico to India in search of their fortune. Shortly after Columbus discovered the New World, the Pope divided the globe in half, with Spain receiving most of North and South America, and Portugal being given eastern Brazil, Africa, and the vast Indian Ocean with its many ports. This agreement was then finalized with the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494. By 1500, Spanish conquistadors were exploring their new holdings, discovering and conquering many people groups scattered around the landmass. Eventually, the Spanish learned of gold and silver deposits in modern-day Mexico and Bolivia, which were promptly mined out using the natives as forced labor. Other European powers noticed the wealth flowing from the New World and were determined not to be left out. As a result of his 1521 Italian War against Spain, the French king Francis I became the first monarch to authorize privateering against enemy ships. While regular pirate ships had no legal backing, privateers had legal protections in their home country. If captured, they were to be treated as prisoners of war and not pirates, because technically they were soldiers of the king. This trend that Francis started would continue for centuries to come. If there was a war in Europe, one could always expect an increase of piratical behaviors abroad. French privateers soon began attacking Spanish treasure ships, one of the most notable being Francois Leclerc, who was reported to be the first pirate to have a peg leg. An even more famous Englishman would also get a piece of the action. Francis Drake and his crew would attack Spanish shipping in the Caribbean, capturing several treasure galleons. He stole over 25,000 pesos of gold, along with 26 tons of silver, which is worth over $500 million US. Upon his return to England in 1580, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth I. After this adventure, Drake would fight against the Spanish Armada in 1588 and go on to become a member of Parliament. As time passed on, other ships would follow the example set by Drake, Leclerc, and several other legends. Sailing to the New World, Dutch and English crews would join the fray, earning the name Sea Dogs. By 1560, the Spanish were forced to adopt a convoy system for its treasure ships due to the growing threat of piracy. France attempted to found a colony in Florida, although Spanish troops from St. Augustine attacked the settlement, foiling France's first attempt at Caribbean colonization. At the Peace of Cateau-Cambrésis, boundaries were drawn and agreed upon. The lines of amity, which ran north through the Canary Islands and west along the Tropic of Cancer, acted as a border to a Spanish exclusive area. They also divided the European and non-European worlds. On the European side, all treaties and agreements were to be upheld, although once a ship crossed onto the non-European side, its protection could not be guaranteed. Despite this, many foreign ships entered this area, whether to establish colonies or attack merchant vessels. As the 17th century dawned, several changes came to the New World. Spain's wars in Europe and constant shipments of gold and silver via treasure ships drove up inflation. As a result, cash crops such as sugarcane and tobacco became a more viable way of making money. Spain also outlawed its merchants from trading with foreigners, although instead of securing a monopoly, it only encouraged more smuggling, piracy, and attempts to found new colonies by other nations. This dramatically increased the demand for labor in the New World. At first, indentured servants or native slaves were used to harvest crops. As time went on, slaves brought from Africa became the most common form of labor. This was because of the triangular trade, a multi-continental trade route which relied on raw goods from the New World. These raw goods, such as sugar and tobacco, were brought to Europe and refined into manufactured goods. These manufactured goods were then shipped to Africa and traded with local chieftains and slave traders for more labor. Once they were all packed onto slave ships, the Atlantic crossing would be made. This was the most brutal part of the journey. People were chained together and stuffed below decks in cramped holds with little food or water. Many would die of starvation and disease on this leg of the journey, or would be executed by the crew to intimidate other prisoners. Upon reaching the New World, a slave would be separated from his or her family and sold at auction. Yet the nightmare was only beginning. Slaves were expected to work up to 12 hours a day in the fields. During harvest time, they would work for 18 to 24 hours. The work was grueling, and many died every day from malnutrition, disease, and cruelty from their overseers. Despite this, replacements were shipped in frequently, ensuring that plantation owners always had a fresh source of bodies. This evil system of commerce and greed fueled Europe's economy, giving nations much-needed surplus funds to build up their militaries. Soon, more European colonists began to sail to the Caribbean to establish new settlements, only growing the transatlantic slave trade and the triangular trade as a whole. This is where pirates come in. Many merchant vessels had small crews and lacked naval escorts. Combine this with the fact that Europe was always at war with itself and there were many Spanish goods that merchants couldn't get legally, meant that the number of sailors turned pirate would skyrocket. That is what happened in the 1630s. New wars had broken out in the Old World, drawing Spanish resources away from the Caribbean, which left many forts and settlements undermanned and vulnerable. One notorious group of pirates would arrive in the New World at this time, although they would turn to piracy for a very different reason than stated earlier. The Buccaneers were originally French hunters and settlers on the island of Hispaniola. The Spanish, who laid claim to the island at the time, tried to drive them out by seizing their lands and exterminating the animals that they hunted. As time went on, the Spanish continued to pursue the Buccaneers, eventually driving them onto the offshore island of Tortuga. Now unable to make a living for themselves, this group of oppressed French settlers turned to piracy as a last resort, similar to the Somali pirates in the modern day. At first, they possessed no ships, so the Buccaneers used canoes and ambush tactics to catch anchored Spanish ships off guard. Later, veterans of the 30 Years' War and English Civil Wars would arrive and join their ranks, giving them valuable military experience and bigger ships. This group of hunters turned pirates would raid Spanish settlements and ships, even engaging in land battles against garrison troops. By this time, the golden age of piracy was in full swing, and the pirate captain had many friendly ports to choose to operate from. Among their ranks was Henry Morgan, a Welsh plantation owner and eventually lieutenant governor of Port Royal. He would raid Spanish settlements throughout the 1660s until he was arrested in 1672. This was because he had attacked Spanish Panama shortly after hostilities between England and Spain had ceased, which he was unaware of. Although the public opinion about Morgan would change, he was eventually knighted by King Charles II in 1674 and sent back to the Caribbean to govern Jamaica. He would remain in Jamaican politics until his death in 1688. Another buccaneer who was active around this time was Francois Lelone, a French pirate who roamed the Caribbean during the late 1660s. In 1666, he and his men set sail from Tortuga and sacked Maracaibo, which is in modern-day Venezuela. It was on this expedition that Lelone would earn the title the Bane of the Spanish, after he tortured many of the city's inhabitants in an effort to find the location of their hidden valuables. A year later, he sacked Puerto Cavallo, although on his way back to his ships he was ambushed by a large force of Spaniards. Narrowly escaping with his life, Lelone captured several enemy soldiers and demanded that they show him the route back to San Pedro, which is where his fleet was anchored. When they refused to show him the way, he drew his cutlass, cut out a Spaniard's heart, and took a bite out of it. The now terrified prisoners quickly complied, leading the depleted band of pirates to their vessels. On his way back to Tortuga, Bolognese ran aground on a shoal in the Pearl Keys, which is located in modern-day Nicaragua. When attempts to dislodge the craft were unsuccessful, he and his men headed inland to find food and settlements to sack. Yet, this fearsome French pirate's luck would run out. He was captured by a tribe of cannibals and eaten, ending the career of one of the most brutal buccaneers in history. By the 1690s, the buccaneers had cut a bloody swath across the Caribbean for 60 years. But that era of plundering was coming to an end. Local governments, which had recently struggled to control the buccaneers, were becoming stronger. European powers also began to drop the no peace beyond the line policy, causing these once feared marauders to be tolerated less by nations. By 1700, the buccaneers had been wiped out. Many sought legal work or joined regular pirate crews. The Caribbean had become less profitable for sea dogs, and a new ocean to plunder was needed. In the time that the buccaneers had roamed the Caribbean, almost every major settlement on the Spanish Main had been sacked, exhausting local resources. In short, there was simply nothing left to rob. Additionally, Port Royal, a well-known pirate haven, was partially destroyed in an earthquake. New English trade laws also restricted merchants in their business dealings, leaving colonies such as New York in desperate need of income, legal or not. In 1692, Thomas II received a letter of marque from the governor of Bermuda to attack French holdings in West Africa. He and another privateer, Captain George Dew, made their way across the Atlantic and towards Africa together. Although on the way, the two were separated in a storm. Dew decided to go full pirate and made his way to the Red Sea, obtained a new letter of marque, and began to prey on trade ships from India. He eventually captured a large ganja dhow, which was carrying about $23 million in gold and silver alone. After hitting the jackpot, Dew returned to the New World. Word of his exploits soon spread, turning him into an instant celebrity. By November of 1694, he was already preparing for another expedition. Arriving at the mouth of the Red Sea once again in August 1695, Dew found several other pirate captains who also sought to plunder Indian trade ships. Among them was Henry Every, who commanded the powerful 46-gun frigate Fancy. In September, the pirate armada of 5 ships encountered a convoy from the Mughal Empire in India. The pirates pursued and plundered any ships they liked. Unfortunately for Thomas II, he was killed after being hit by a cannonball. His crew quickly surrendered, although Every was able to capture the ship that they were being held on and freed them. He then set his sights on one of the largest ships in the convoy, the Ganji Sawai, a 62-gun ganja carrying over 1,000 passengers and crew. Despite having the manpower and firepower advantages, things didn't go well for the Ganji Sawai. During the opening volleys, one of her cannons exploded, killing several gunners and causing mass confusion throughout the ship. To make things worse, one of Every's broadsides hit the mainmast, knocking it over. Pirates flooded onto the ship and took it for their own. Every and his men stole over $200 million worth of gold, silver, gemstones, and other valuables. Once the treasure was split up, the pirate fleet disbanded. Nobody was willing to risk losing their newfound fortune. Enraged at the loss of his prized treasure ship, the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb almost cut off all diplomatic relations with England. To appease him and keep trade routes open, Parliament declared Henry Every and all pirates responsible for the attack on the Mughal treasure fleet enemies of mankind, despite the fact that many of them have received letters of marque from governors in the New World. Despite efforts to search for him, Every was never found. He disappeared from historical records in 1696 without a trace. Some theorized that he was cheated of his fortune and died in poverty, while others believed that he changed his name and peacefully retired. With bounties still on their heads, pirate hunters flocked to the Indian Ocean to hunt for the sea dogs who plundered the Ganji Sawai. Among them was a now world-famous pirate captain named William Kidd. Kidd had gone on several pirating expeditions before he received a privateering commission in New York, which was a prominent pirate haven at the time. His main goal was to hunt down Henry Every and the rest of the pirate fleet, although he was also allowed to attack other ships. Taking his new ship, the Adventure Galley, he would eventually come across and capture the Casa Merchant, an Indian ship captained by an Englishman. After this, he was declared a pirate and arrested upon his return to the New World. He would be hanged on May 23, 1701. As time went on, less pirates made the trip to the Indian Ocean. Most pirate havens were located in the Americas, which made the trip long and expensive. Indian trade convoys also began utilizing escort ships to stave off any would-be attackers. Despite this, new wars in Europe were brewing, giving sea dogs more profitable privateering commissions closer to home. In 1701, the War of Spanish Succession broke out. The 13-year-long conflict was a global affair, with much of Europe and their colonies at each other's throats. One victim of this global war was the English colony of Nassau. It had been raided in 1703 and again in 1706, leaving the port town desolate. Privateers and later pirates flocked to the colony, making it their home base. As time went on, the pirates who inhabited the port formed into a loose coalition known as the Pirate Republic. Through an informal code, crews could vote on leadership and how the Republic was governed. As the War of Spanish Succession came to a close, two pirate captains rose to dominate Nassau's politics. At first, Benjamin Hornigold and Henry Jennings were bitter rivals, although they put aside their differences and joined forces, forming the Flying Gang. The Flying Gang was basically the pirate version of the MCU. The coalition boasted members such as Charles Vane, a ruthless pirate who was known for torturing his prisoners and showing little to no respect for his crew members. Next up is Stede Bonnet, a plantation owner and gentleman turned pirate, because why not? Overall, he wasn't a very good sailor or pirate and his men did not respect him. And finally, one of the most famous sea dogs in history. Edward Teach, otherwise known as Blackbeard, was a former privateer who took Hornigold's position after he retired in 1717. Blackbeard had a very successful career in the short time that he roamed the high seas. In November of 1717, Teach captured La Concorde, a French slave ship which he renamed the Queen Anne's Revenge. When in battle, he would place lit slow matches under his hat. Combine this with his tall stature and thick beard, he was a terrifying foe. His fearsome reputation allowed him to win an election in Nassau, promoting him to Magistrate of the Pirate Republic. Later, in May 1718, he made history by blockading Charleston Harbor, capturing several prominent citizens and holding them hostage. After trading them for medical supplies, he escaped, although his prized flagship would run aground in early June off the coast of North Carolina. Shortly after this, he accepted a pardon and settled in Bath. Meanwhile, in England, King George I had issued a pardon to any and all pirates if they turned themselves in. He also appointed Woodes Rogers, a well-known sea captain and privateer, as Captain General and Governor-in-Chief. His task was to snuff out piracy in the Caribbean. Rogers gathered a small fleet of 10 ships, along with several hundred sailors, 100 soldiers, and 130 colonists. He also packed religious pamphlets to give to captured pirates, as he thought some would change their ways after listening to Christian teachings. Rogers' first target was the Pirate Republic of Nassau. Upon arriving on July 24, 1718, he discovered the notorious sea dog Charles Vane and his crew in port there. After negotiations to detain him failed, Vane set one of his ships on fire and sailed it towards Rogers' fleet. The English ships gave the burning vessel a wide berth, allowing Vane to escape Nassau on a small sloop. Despite his failure to capture a notorious pirate, Rogers had successfully liberated Nassau from piracy. In due time, he would pursue the sea dogs scattered around the Caribbean, or so he thought. Rogers faced several setbacks. An unknown disease swept through the ranks of his expedition, killing 100. Ships sent to improve diplomatic relations with the Spanish governor of Cuba revolted, turning pirate. To make things even worse, 2 out of the 3 Royal Navy escorts that he had with him left, as they had no orders to remain with him. Instead of letting these roadblocks end his policing efforts, Rogers simply made do with the resources he had left. He began rebuilding Nassau's defenses, which had fallen into disrepair under pirate rule. Additionally, two former pirates, Benjamin Hornigold and John Cockram, were sent to search for Vane. When efforts to find him proved unsuccessful, Hornigold went on another voyage to capture the sailors who had recently rebelled against Rogers. He returned with 10 fugitives, one of whom was John Auger, a pirate captain. That December, 9 out of the 10 pirates were convicted and hanged. The rule of law had returned to Nassau. Rogers never succeeded in finding Vane. In February of 1719, the pirate captain was shipwrecked on a deserted island and stranded. When an English ship stopped nearby to collect water, he attempted to join its crew. Vane was recognized and arrested. After being convicted of piracy and some prison time, he was executed in March of 1721. The law was catching up to other pirates as well. Stede Bonnet had accepted a pardon in 1718, although he quickly returned to his piratical ways under an alias. In late August, news reached Charlestown that Bonnet was repairing his ship in the Cape Fear River. With the memory of Blackbeard's blockade still fresh in the minds of many South Carolinians, nobody was eager to have any sea dogs on their doorstep. Governor Robert Johnson sent Colonel William Rhett along with 2 sloops and 130 men. On September 22, 1718, the English force arrived at the Cape Fear River. After learning that the 2 ships full of angry militiamen were in fact there to fight him, Bonnet plotted his next move. Despite being heavily outnumbered, he hoped to fight his way out to sea and escape. The next morning, the battle commenced. Rhett chased Bonnet into shallow waters, causing all 3 ships to run aground. After several hours of exchanging musket fire, one of the English ships was able to free itself and sail closer to the pirates. Bonnet surrendered. He and his crew were arrested and taken to Charlestown. One failed escape attempt later, and he was hanged on December 10, 1718, putting an end to his piratical career. Blackbeard resumed his lawless ways even after he was pardoned, going as far as to have a several-day-long drinking party with Charles Vane. Wanting to boost his reputation and protect local commerce, Alexander Spotswood, the lieutenant governor of Virginia, sent 2 sloops under Robert Maynard to track the sea dog down and capture him. On November 21, 1718, the English force found Teach in Ocracoke Inlet, North Carolina. Instead of opting to attack immediately, Maynard waited until the next day, as he was unfamiliar with the local channels and shoals. He also stopped all traffic into the inlet, so that no one could warn the pirate of Royal Navy ships. Just like the clash with Stede Bonnet, the following morning, the English vessels raised their anchors and sailed towards the pirate ship. Upon spotting Maynard bearing down on him, Teach cut his anchor cable and resorted to a running fight. At this point, all 3 ships began firing. A broadside from Blackbeard's sloop hit Maynard's flagship, killing or wounding around 29 and severely damaging the craft. English small arms fire cut the pirate's jib sheet, causing the ship to run aground. Accounts differ on if Maynard had run aground as well, but nevertheless, both ships were immobilized. It was at this point that Teach called out to the disabled Royal Navy ship, saying, "Damn you for villains! Who are you, and from whence you came?" Lieutenant Maynard answered, "You may see by our colors that we are no pirates." Blackbeard then requested a parley and asked Maynard to come aboard his ship via boat so that he could speak with him. Maynard refused, replying, "I cannot spare my boat, but I will come aboard of you as soon as I can with my sloop." Knowing that a fight was his only option for survival, Blackbeard took a glass of liquor and drank to him. "Damnation seize my soul if I give you quarters or take any from you," he said. In response to Blackbeard, Maynard stated that he expected no quarter from him, nor would he give any. Maynard began moving his sloop towards Teach. In preparation for the coming hand-to-hand combat, the lieutenant ordered most of his crew to hide below deck. Grappling hooks drew the ship closer. Grenades were thrown, covering the deck in smoke and broken glass. Blackbeard led his men onto the English ship and began firing at Maynard and the few men at the ship's wheel. Suddenly, the rest of the Navy men burst from the lower deck. Blackbeard had been caught in an ambush. The pirate captain rallied his men and brutal hand-to-hand combat broke out. During the chaos, both Maynard and Teach found each other. The two fired their flintlocks and then drew their cutlasses. Being a skilled swordsman, Teach quickly broke the lieutenant's sword at the hilt. He would have ended Maynard right then and there if it wasn't for an English sailor slashing him across the neck. The sea dog went berserk, killing several men before he was finally put down. Shortly after this, the rest of the pirates surrendered, ending the battle. Upon inspecting Blackbeard's body, Maynard discovered that the pirate had been shot 5 times and suffered 20 cuts before he finally died. His corpse was thrown into the sea and his head was taken back to Virginia, where it would be placed on a pole at the entrance of the Chesapeake Bay, as a warning to any and all pirates. The remainder of Teach's crew was jailed in Williamsburg, Virginia. In March of 1719, 14 out of the 16 pirates were convicted and hanged. Despite his bravery, Maynard was never recognized for his actions. After his return to Virginia, he faded into obscurity, later dying in 1751 and being buried in Kent, England. England's goal of ending piracy was coming to fruition. Nassau, the safe haven for lawlessness, had been taken, leaving many sea dogs without a home base, and on the run from the Royal Navy. Those who hadn't been caught yet fled east, to plunder undefended slave ships off the coast of Africa, briefly reviving the pirate round. Nevertheless, a few corsairs still caused chaos in the New World, one of whom was Bartholomew Roberts, a Welsh pirate who roamed as far south as Brazil and as far north as Newfoundland. He was one of the most daring and successful sea dogs in history. Some of his exploits included robbing a Portuguese treasure fleet, raiding Conso, Nova Scotia, and killing the French governor of Martinique. These were only a few of his crimes, and to truly do his story justice, I would have to make a video centered solely on him. Yet, just like many other fugitives, he fled to Africa hoping to escape the law. He was eventually discovered and died fighting the Royal Navy in 1722. Piracy continued to decline after this point. By 1730, the Golden Age was over. Despite a much more lawful ocean, piracy never died out. The prospects of easy wealth and adventure still lured a small number of brave souls who were willing to sail under the black flag. These piratical remnants would remain a nuisance to empires throughout the Age of Sail and into the modern day, where groups such as the Somali pirates still harass merchant vessels to this very day. In the end, Europe's industrial and military might overcame the old buccaneering spirit. No longer would adventurers sack the Spanish Main or find plunder on a gold-laden ship. The law had arrived, and it was here to stay.